Mercer. There's no Aaron today, so it's just me talking to Stephen Gurr, who is a nutritionist at Premier Athletic Therapy and Sports Medicine here in St. John's. But first, I'd like to thank everyone for listening to this podcast, and please encourage everyone to please subscribe, rate, and review to wherever you get your podcast, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, Stitcher, or YouTube. My YouTube channel is up. And please visit my website at www.concussiontalks.com. Thank you very much. And without further ado, here's Stephen Gurr. Okay, so Stephen, now can you just tell everybody who you are, where you work, where you are now?
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, and thank you for thanks for inviting me on the podcast. As I mentioned to you previously, I'm a big fan of podcasts in general, so a bit of a dream come true to be on a podcast. I never thought I'd be invited. In terms of my nutrition background, I studied in Australia back in the early 2000s, and then soon after graduating, I was lucky enough to get a job at the Australian Institute of Sport for 2 years, and that was an incredible learning experience. I just got to work with some of the best people in sports nutrition there are, so people like Louise Burke and Greg Cox and Liz Broad. So I spent 2 years there, and then I moved to a country most people haven't heard of, but they might next year when the World Cup's on. I moved to a place called Doha in Qatar. And there I worked for 9 years as a sports dietitian at the Aspire Academy for Sports Excellence, and also Aspetar Sports Medicine Hospital. During that time, I worked mainly with youth athletes, so athletes aged between 12 and 18, mostly in what they call football over there, but we call soccer, but also a range of individual sports. And I also had the opportunity to work with a lot of track and field athletes, both youth and senior athletes. And it was just a really good learning experience over there, and I got to travel a lot too, which was really, I was really fortunate in that sense as well. And then in 2019, late 2019, I moved to St. John's with my wife. She's lived here. She was in Doha as well, working. And we decided to move here, and then been here since September 2019, and currently working at Premier Athletic Therapy.
That's great, because I've had Ashley Hiscock who's been on this program, and actually found that on the front page. Matt and Ashley did a video with them in late 2019.
Yeah.
And so that Ashley's been a big support of this, and it's been great to have her on, and great day. I asked her, and she said you're a great person to talk to. So we're here to talk about concussion. And I know your background is more in your athletic background is more running and playing sports like that. But also you obviously know concussion, nutrition from elite performance, and it's the master's level and just general. Keep yourself fit and keep yourself healthy. So, how did you don't necessarily have expertise in or didn't? I'm sure you do now in concussion nutrition, but you obviously and you do a lot of talks on different dietary aspects of sport, and not just necessarily sport, but just injury prevention, injury recovery. Recovery is a better word. To get a better word, recovery. So, how did you go about researching for concussion nutrition?
Yeah, look, really good question, Nick. So, I suppose part of my role as a sports dietitian is always to try and translate scientific knowledge and make it practical for athletes. So, as a way of improving their health and performance. So the way I went about this, obviously I didn't have a lot of time. Initially, I actually went to the Sports Research and Information Centre. It's a really, as you know, it's a really good resource. And there was an article on there by a sports dietitian called Ashley Armstrong. And it was a really good article in the sense that it had a bit of scientific stuff in there with some references, and also, but just really practical information for athletes. So I'd really encourage athletes to have a look at that. But from there, there was that article was, as I said, was well referenced, and then I looked up some of those articles through a database called PubMed, and then generally, if I'm trying to find out information about a topic, Nick, I'll look for review articles, good review articles, or what they call meta-analysis, so an analysis of a whole different group of articles on a particular topic, and then from there look at individual studies that have been cited in those. Right. And generally, from what I found, a lot of the common themes came up in those articles, which is that hasn't been a lot of research into sports nutrition.
Sorry.
Quite an exciting area. So, yeah. And I suppose we'll dig a bit into that now.
I believe exactly will. But I guess because your background is just in sports recovery from injury and from just keeping yourself fit and being performing better. So how do you approach that? Like, if someone's recovering from, say, injury, that doesn't matter what injury, but they've been off for a while, and how would you advise them in general sense? Don't need the specific examples, but general sense of how to get back health wise and nutrition wise.
Yeah, I suppose the approach. Just I will say about. Obviously, no athlete likes being injured, and generally the goal of an athlete is to get back and playing their sport as soon as possible. But it is an opportunity for practitioners like me to probably spend a bit more time with athletes too, because they then don't have that sport commitment. But generally, we're looking to make sure that the athletes get back in the best shape possible. So what we're trying to do is minimise the extent of muscle mass loss, because obviously if they're not doing their sport, their muscles might atrophy a bit. So protein's a big part of that story, combined with athletic therapy and strength and conditioning. So just making sure that they don't lose too much of the muscle they need to play their sport. And also from a body composition point of view too, Nick, just making sure that they don't... A lot of athletes will eat the same as they do if they're when they're injured is when they're playing sport. So there's a tendency to put on excess body mass. So just making sure that athletes are guided in terms of appropriate food choices and making sure that they probably draw back the amount of energy they're having, at the same time increasing their protein intake to try and offset any sort of muscle mass loss. And just, trying to really, as a really good opportunity, just to try and maximize the whole healthiness or nutrient density of their diet.
Yeah, exactly, right. Because actually, the other day I know should be on May 4th, which should be in the past by this point. This podcast is out. But I talked to Scott Anderson, who works for TJ's. They have a concussion recovery triad. So exercise, sleep, and nutrition. So this will lead us into what's the main thing when you read about the concussion, when you researched concussion recovery? How does it work really for nutrition wise? What's the best?
Look, we'll have to. I'll try and keep on topic here as much as possible. Like there's quite a few things that came up. I suppose one of the most important things to keep in mind, Nick, is that a lot of the research is very new, and a lot of the research is being done on either animals or on clients or people who've had severe or moderate traumatic brain injuries. So, which is not directly transferable to concussion research. So just that's going to be relevant to all the stuff we talk about today. But I suppose in that initial phase, when just in the first few days after the concussion, obviously there's symptoms around headaches and nausea and fatigue. So reduced appetite, but that's a time when your body actually needs more nutrients. So that could be a real challenge for athletes, because they actually need more energy, and they need more other nutrients like protein and a few other key vitamins and minerals. But at the same time, they're not feeling like they want to prepare food, or they just don't have the energy to prepare food.
And they're avoiding sport.
Sorry?
And they're avoiding their sport.
Yeah, exactly. So a really good strategy to come over that is just making sure that if they are feeling like that, just making sure they have access to regular small meals, and making sure that those meals contain a very nutrient dense, so they contain lots of protein, energy, and different nutrients, to make sure if they're not consuming a lot, they just want to make sure that they are getting all they need in a smaller time frame, if you like.
Right.
So that's what.
Sorry. I was just saying. In the longer term, and so as concussion, as you cover, is there any targeted nutrition advice for?
Look, I suppose some of the big ones that came up, Nick, are omega-3 fatty acids. So we know that omega-3 is such an important for healthy brain and healthy brain development. So there's been a fair bit of research around. There's 3 types of omega-3s, and I'm not going to try and pronounce them because I'll just embarrass myself. But DHA, LLA, and EPA. But the main one's DHA. But that's, as most of your listeners will probably know, that we get most of our omega-3s from fatty fish. So things like salmon and trout and sardines. But we can also, for people who don't like fish, or they can also get another one of the omega-3s, LLA, through plant-based sources, such as, I'll just refer to my cheat sheet because I always forget.
Of course, yes.
But things like flax seeds, walnuts, soybeans, soy milk, so more plant-based sources. Now, but ideally, in terms of practical advice, if athletes aim to sort of have 2 fish meals a week at a minimum, and as preferably if they're fatty fish, as I said, like salmon or sardines or trout. But I suppose there's a bit of a cost issue for that, because it's not, especially if you're a student athlete, buying salmon 2 times a week from the supermarket.
Does it matter if it's canned or fresh or frozen?
Look, it doesn't really make a difference, Nick. I think both are suitable, and you've got to, as with any athlete, we've got to work within their flavour preferences and within their budget as well.
That's true.
I think it's really, really important.
So budget really can still play a big part in this, eh? Like big part in recovery or not necessarily recovery, but for how well that the way they can adhere to any schedule you give them to recovery.
Yep. And I suppose another thing that came up a lot, many of your listeners, especially your anyone who's a strength and power athlete, would be familiar with creatine.
I was going to say this.
And creatine is one of these supplements, one of the few supplements in sports nutrition that's actually been proven to work in terms of allowing athletes to, especially repeated high intensity exercise. But the reason it's important, there's a lot of research interest when it comes to concussion, is because creatine also provides energy for the brain, and we know that in concussion, creatine levels in the brain are decreased. So there's a lot of research into what sort of level of dosing would be required, and what effect, if any, creatine supplementation could have on recovery from concussion. Most people will be aware too that creatine you can get from the diet, but the levels you need for these, in the context of sport performance effects, you need to take a supplement. But like all the other research in concussion, Nick, it's still early days, so they still need to do a lot more. Most of the studies, again, are from animal models and also from people with severe traumatic brain injury.
So for in terms of omega-3, you said we all know they're good for the brain, but what do they do for the brain?
Oh, they're really important just for brain development and functioning, Nick. I can't take a really deep dive into that.
No.
But the studies that have shown they can play a role in reducing brain damage and just reducing or attenuating cognitive decline as well. But again, we have to be careful in terms of we're not at a stage yet where we can recommend specific dose or a dose of supplements or I didn't mention, obviously people will be familiar with omega-3 supplements. Again, they've been studied a lot in different health contexts as well.
But you can't put them into a certain dosage though.
Yeah, like that, generally you'd be okay if you're not, especially if you're not a person who likes or does enjoy eating fish. Like 1 milligram dose, but making sure that it does provide both DHA and EPA is very, very important.
And what about say nutrients and minerals? Are they or any other aspects?
Yeah, so there's been a couple of others have gained interest is vitamin E and vitamin C. Both again shown that they can be beneficial in terms of enhancing recovery after injury, after concussion. Vitamin E and vitamin C are well known as playing an important role anyway, Nick, in immune function. But again, it's not. That doesn't mean that we're going to encourage athletes to go out and buy vitamin E supplements or vitamin C supplements. Most athletes and most people can get all the vitamin E and C they need from real food options. And just by way of example, Nick, if you're having, like in the instance of vitamin E, which is a fat-soluble vitamin, if you're eating, say, a salmon, you're getting some vitamin E, you're getting some omega-3, and you're getting some high-quality protein at the same time, which just shows us it's really important to try. It's always more beneficial for athletes to try and get what they need through real foods because they provide a range of nutrients in one package, if you like, rather than trying to take individual supplements, which leads me to think about, obviously, with the supplement studies they have done, they're studying the supplement in isolation, and we don't really know what interaction, if they're taking other supplements, which athletes commonly do, they usually take a range of supplements. We don't know what the interaction effects of that is, and if that taking a range of supplements actually diminishes the effects of each other, or they enhance the effects of each other. So I suppose I'm just a big advocate of eating real food, Nick.
Yes. Yeah, because okay, this is not like I'm rambling here. Another podcast that we talked to many concussions around, listen to her from many concussion survivors, and they talk about how not all of them obviously, but many people talk about it, to go down some the dark hole. They get depressed because the emotional effects of having concussion, and they perhaps eat or drink or do whatever. So is there anything that people should avoid after when they're recovering from concussion? Is there anything they shouldn't eat?
Yeah, and there's a couple of other things I think in terms of the should eat, but probably the big thing that stands out in terms of what they shouldn't have, Nick, is alcohol. One thing I didn't touch on before, which is remiss, is hydration. Is very, very important for people, especially in that short-term recovery phase, because alcohol is a diuretic, and just in terms of coping with headaches, being dehydrated makes that worse. So anything that promotes dehydration is not a good thing.
What about like coffee, for example? I know coffee's also diuretic, but
yeah, that's. I think coffee's okay, Nick. I think coffee is not really a powerful diuretic, so it's not as good as water. No. But it's you're still retaining some of that fluid, so I wouldn't see that as a major. But I suppose it's interesting if we're telling athletes to, say, increase their intake of omega-3 or vitamin E or vitamin C, so eating lots of healthy fats and vegetables. If you're eating if you then choose to eat a lot of highly processed foods or fast foods, obviously there's the negative health consequences of doing that, but also it means almost by definition you're going to miss out on eating the stuff that actually could enhance your recovery. So obviously we can't eat everything. So avoiding, like any time, I think, Nick, avoiding things that are really highly processed in terms of lots of refined sugar or saturated fats are things we don't want to have too much of for a whole range of reasons. And also that's very, very relevant for concussion as well.
Yeah. No, I know, like my sister, for example, she doesn't have a concussion, and she's very healthy, and she does, like, there's some foods she loves, but she won't eat them. She won't eat them as much because there's a waste of her caloric intake kind of thing. She shouldn't say that, but she's a waste of the food she went into, or she'd rather eat something that's better for her, basically, than just something that she just likes, just tastes good. The second.
Yeah.
Same
yeah,
thing.
I think it sounds like, I think with all athletes, regardless if they're recovering from injury or they're actually playing their sport, most of the time they should be looking to as you said, they should be really trying to maximize the nutrient density of what they're eating. So choosing foods that provide a whole range of different nutrients rather than individual, like, very processed or refined foods that generally are lacking in nutrients that our bodies need. One thing I did, before I forget, Nick, one thing that I'm sure some of your listeners would have heard, very, very important, we've talked about vitamin E, vitamin C, but also polyphenols, so antioxidants, things like blueberries and grapes and peanuts. So they're so the polyphenols, I'm losing my polyphenols that have gained some sort of research interest in the area of concussion are curcumin and resveratrol. So resveratrol is found in things like grapes and blueberries and peanuts, and curcumin is an active ingredient in turmeric spice. So again, I'm not encouraging athletes to go and put turmeric in everything they eat or have blueberries at every meal.
I've heard a lot about turmeric.
Yeah, but in terms of dosage, it's not very clear how much athletes would have to be taking. And I think to get to the level of dosage you need, what they use in these animal trials, I think is beyond, you'd have to get it from a supplement of some sort. But like, all of this is just sort of reminding me of the importance of, again, I think I've gone on this a bit, but just trying to, at every meal, just thinking about how you can get the most nutrients into whatever you're eating. So things like, we talked about one of the omega-3 LLA. So just things, adding nuts and seeds to your cereal in the morning or your oatmeal in the morning is just a good way of getting those things in without, while getting other nutrients you need at the same time.
Yeah, so you're kind of saying that just no need to necessarily no need to that, but there's the tendency people to take like supplements and just shortcuts to get all these nutrients are great. But if you just eat healthy, eat well, and do note that there are some obvious benefits to eating certain foods and not others, and especially not wasting your food. Just say dollar, but food, energy, food, like the amount that fills you up. It says don't waste that on fast food or, necessarily fries or which are delicious. But so that, so don't just waste your time in that when you could eat stuff that's going to give you benefits to help you recover faster. Not the same as just eating when you're just normal, just fine. But if you're injured, you gotta think about it if you're really serious about taking time to get better, to recover.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Nick. But unfortunately, I think one of the barriers, I'm going to state the obvious here, but a lot of those quote unquote bad foods that you're talking about, they're the ones that are generally a lot cheaper and easier to access and the most heavily marketed. So it can be very challenging for athletes and the general population to to eat a diet that is healthy, especially if they're on a lower income, which is not something you or I could probably fix in a day, but that's where we've got to try and figure out ways to encourage and support athletes as best they can, and give them strategies where they can work around that.
Do you have any strategies for someone who's recovering from concussion who may not have money to just like acai berries or something like that to put in this, like some of these fruits that are more exotic and more expensive, or something, and just some can just choose what to eat and not be influenced by marketing. Or so is there anything that, say, if somebody's just going to the local Sobeys, which are groceries right here, you can just pick up that's just to be good for them to have after a concussion.
Yeah, look, I suppose the classic saying with supermarkets is that you just go around the outside.
Yeah.
And that's very true. But we'll maybe focus on one thing, like fresh berries, like blueberries, strawberries, like they do provide a lot of nutrients that we need, and it's very relevant for our discussion today. But again, $5 for 200 grams is beyond a lot of people. So if they can, choosing the frozen berries, which are just as, almost just as good, and a lot cheaper, and using those, having those on hand in your freezer or in your fridge, it just makes it easier to add those foods to different meals that you're having, your cereal or a smoothie, whatever it may be. Like the fatty fish, I think is more of an issue. Like that is very expensive, but using maybe some canned options that are a lot cheaper, things like sardines. I'm racking my brain here. I'm sure there's and canned tuna, but doesn't provide as much, but still on the right path to having the right type of foods.
Does it matter if the tuna is? I know there's a white tuna and a red tuna. It seems like all the fish you mentioned, the trout and salmon and sardines. I don't know. The sardines, I don't know at all, but are red fish. So is that the trend?
I think, I'm not sure. What was I trying to say? But I think, I'm not sure if this is going to answer your question, Nick, but going to the supermarket is overwhelming for most people. Yeah. So I think if we keep things really simple, and avoiding about 3 or 4 aisles in the supermarket is a really good way of doing that. I suppose, it is challenging, but I think athletes, you just got to work with what they can, like if they have the budget to do it, fantastic. If they don't have the budget to have that perfect diet, there's always some alternatives to that.
And it doesn't mean you're not going to recover. It just means it's just different tact.
Different way, and it's a really good way of trying novel ideas and novel ways of achieving the same goal. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So what would you recommend? Someone is concussed and they come to Premier and they see Ashley and they get a massage or they do strength training. They come to you and they say, I want to get back to playing soccer. So someone is injured. Someone says, says 41 tomorrow.
And, you're a young man, Nick.
A young man, yes. So they say they get injured, they get a concussion playing soccer, and they come and they're still going to get back into it.
In terms of nutrition, so initially dealing with the symptoms, I think is really, really important. So as we've talked about before, if they are experience like they've got no appetite, they're having headaches or they're nauseous or whatever it may be, trying to encourage them and their family and their support and friends just to make sure small frequent meals, things like smoothies, liquid meal supplements, yogurts, things that provide a lot of nutrients but don't need them to eat a lot of food. Especially if they're nauseous, having an empty stomach is really problematic for that. But then just generally as we move away from that acute setting, really focus, as I said before, on taking that opportunity where they might be playing a little less sport to try and make some subtle changes to their diet just to improve the overall nutrient density of their diet. but also thinking about we want to make sure this athlete gets back onto the field as soon as possible. So trying to reduce the extent of muscle mass, so making sure that they get their protein distribution right throughout the day, and also making sure that they limit or the amount they don't consume as much food as they normally would, just to make sure that they don't gain any excess fat mass that may slow down their progression to getting back to normal play. And talking about and trying to incorporate some of those things we talked about before in terms of specific to concussion. So vitamin E, vitamin C, informing them of the type of foods that give them those nutrients. Things like antioxidants as well, how to incorporate that into their diet. I had another thing there and I just completely forgot.
No worries.
But just giving them, as I said at the start, Nick, I suppose our job as sports dietitians is to take the research and make it understandable and practical for athletes. So giving them realistic targets and changes they can make within the context of their own lives. So generally, and a very general point, when we're dealing with athletes, we don't want them to try and change everything in one go. It's really important they just focus on one or two things at a time, make a good habit out of that, and then move on to the next thing, rather than trying to change their whole diet in one go. Is a really important thing.
Yeah, that's fair. Did you find what you were going to say? That I thought cycling and something that would be a camp and an idea, but I was going to say that kind of recovering from a concussion is kind of like being an athlete, and everyone should just treat there. Just know that they gotta, focus on one thing. Don't try to make it too complicated, and don't necessarily think they have to eat certain foods that may cost much. You have to eat them a certain amount of times a day and all stuff. So just work within your budget, and if you can't afford to eat that, then there are other options. So is there anything main points you'd like to say about the concussion recovery, or anything that you may have left out?
No, I think we've covered most areas, Nick. I think it's really important for people to understand at the moment, unfortunately, that the research is very new, and we can't provide really specific guidelines about supplementation if they want to go down that route. But I think most of the stuff from the research is telling us that if you can really thinking about just having a really varied, balanced diet, just generally,
and eat real foods,
and yes, exactly. I should have said that. But eating real foods. If you do have a concussion, you're not going to have to make drastic changes because you're already into those really good habits already. You're eating lots of fresh fruit and vegetables. You're having lots of plant-based healthy fats, and also plant-based proteins, lean sources of protein. So the transition to trying to recover and doing best practice concussion nutrition is not such a huge step. So just getting into good habits initially, I think is really important. And as you said, focus on real foods with as much variety as possible, and don't think that supplements going to provide is going to be the magic formula or the magic pill to help you recover quicker.
Yeah, I think because just need real foods, and it's more consistent, and you'll get like a varied degree of minerals and proteins, but still enough. Few real foods. Yeah.
So I just again, I'm going off on a tangent again, Nick, but just to reinforce that point, if you bought like an egg with that been fortified with omega-3, you're getting omega-3, you're getting high quality protein, you're also getting fat soluble vitamins, including vitamin E. So you're getting everything in one package.
It's an egg. It's simple.
Yeah, it's an egg. Yeah. It's simple. It's 4 minutes and you're boiled and you're ready to go. So,
yeah, exactly.
And rather than worrying about an individual supplement and thinking, I think that sort of covers it.
Well, thank you so much, Steve, for doing this and talking to us about nutrition. It's amazing. I think haven't really. There are about tiny people who've talked about nutrition and diets on about concussion and brain injury on this podcast before, but never really talked to this person who's necessarily dedicated to nutrition and diet. And it's good to hear all the stuff and that's just regular foods and just be not just regular foods. You gotta bury your vitamins, your minerals, and your certain polyphenols and creatine and all that stuff. But just to stay hydrated. So drink lots of water.
Which can be challenging in itself sometimes. But true. I really would encourage people to track down that article by Ashley on the Sports Research and Information Centre, because it does provide the latest research and also lots of practical strategies that athletes can undertake.
And I've got the exact URL up. So it's sirc.ca/blog/the-role-of--nutrition-in-sport-concussion-recovery.
Yep.
So that's no one's going to write that down, but that's what it is.
If they can follow that perfectly, they're well on the way.
Then don't worry about it. But thank you, and then we're both in St. John's, and it does look like a nice day, and hopefully it'll be a nice day in tomorrow. And so, are you gonna get out for a run now, or after work, or before work, or?
I'm a morning exerciser.
Oh, yeah?
Nick, I alternate between running and throwing a few rocks around the backyard, and that's my weight session on the other days. But keeping it simple.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, and it's been great talking to you, and see, I asked you Matt for me, and everyone at Premier Athletic Therapy who may not have met you yet.
Yeah, I definitely will, and thanks again for the opportunity, Nick. It's been an absolute pleasure. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. The music at the beginning of this podcast is by Ben Sound. www.bensound.com.